Hello and welcome to Diplomatic Channel. I am Amarachi Ubani. The international community has been busy responding to what could be a hijack of electoral process in the Gambia after President Yahya Jammeh, who had earlier conceded, turned around to reject and cancel results of the country's presidential election. Two countries held presidential elections in 2 months and produced almost the same results. The incumbents lost to the opposition and conceded. In fact, Ghana, the other country in the story, is preparing for the inauguration of longtime politician President-elect Nana Akufo-Addo, who has promised to improve the lives of Ghanaians and to restore dignity to the presidency. He has promised to establish the presidency as an embodiment of the spirit, soul and values of Ghana. This story is, however, different in Gambia, but President-elect Adama Barrow is showing he's not a man moved by actions of the sitting president and believes he will eventually relinquish power. In a recent interview last week, he said President Jammeh does not have the authority to cancel the election and that whatever he is doing is illegal. Mr. Barrow recalls President Jammeh called him after the election to say that it had been the best election in the world. Leaders on the continent, clearly disturbed by the unexpected turnaround, paid President Jammeh a visit, cautioning him to redeem his previous position of accepting the results. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari was among the ECOWAS group that made the visit alongside the Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, Sierra Leone President Ernest Bai Koroma, and Ghanaian President John Mahama.
The concerned African leaders put the political situation in Gambia high up on their agenda when they met in Nigeria's capital, Abuja.
We can and must do better.
Members of ECOWAS said on Saturday they would uphold the result of the December 1st election. At the end of their meeting, they said they would attend winner Adama Barrow's inauguration on January 18th, with an aim to bring the matter to a close on Sunday.
It is now important that the authority at this summit considers recommended measures to bring this matter to successful conclusion before January 19.
Barrow's surprise victory and Jammeh's decision to step down were seen across Africa as a moment of hope. But the president announced on December 9th that he would reverse that position and call for a fresh vote, a move widely condemned by other African leaders.
I hereby announce to you Gambians my total rejection of the electoral results and thereby annulling the elections in its entirety, and until we will go back to the polls, because I want to make sure that every Gambian has voted.
He also had a word for members of the international community willing to intervene.
I made one thing very clear, that, and I swore to the Almighty Allah and the Quran, that Gambia will not be colonized twice or enslaved twice, and this will not happen in 1 billion years.
His party is now challenging the result in the country's Supreme Court.
The authority calls on President Yahya Jammeh to accept the result of the polls and refrain from any action likely to compromise the transition and peaceful transfer of power to the president-elect.
Earlier in the week, President Muhammadu Buhari and 3 other presidents visited President Jammeh. When asked later about how their meeting went, he said President Jammeh had been receptive. Their mission was to urge the country's long-ruling leader to respect the will of the people and step down.
Now, ECOWAS is not the only mediator trying to prevent a political crisis in Gambia. So is the West African Network for Peace Building, WANEP. Its executive director, Mr. Chukwemeka Eze, spoke to my colleague Amaka Okafor on the situation and what they're doing to help.
What does WANEP make of President Yahya Jammeh's recent rejection of the election results, especially after he had conceded?
I think a couple of issues leading up to the elections that need us to reflect on. The first thing is an attempt by the president to tamper with the constitution, which includes increasing the filing fees for the presidential candidates, as well as removing the clause on second ballot if somebody does not make up to the required number that is needed to win the presidency. Normally there is a second round. That clause was removed. The other thing that also played out was that the president insisted, and his party supported him, that the counting of the votes should be done only in one place. So there will be no announcement at the polling stations. But what then happened is that the opposition political parties were against this move. And based on that, in order to satisfy the opposition political parties who had cried out that they do not trust the then electoral chairperson to conduct the election, the president appointed somebody that everybody felt was impeachable. And that helped to steer things in favor of the opposition. And for the first time in the history of Gambia elections, the entire opposition, save for one, came together and adopted a candidate who was even outside of the political class, as it were, because he, Adam Mabaro, who is the president-elect, is actually a business guy. So, but as it were, because of the coming together of the opposition, they needed just simple majority, even if it is one vote, to win the election. And that was what happened. And of course, there was some point in time, because we in WANEP, we had the highest number of monitors in the country. We were coordinating a civil society coalition on the election monitoring and the actual election observation. So we are following the trends, and we had even issued a policy brief on the build-up to the elections. So at some point, during the collection of the results, there was a 4 hours, 30 minutes gap. And of course, everybody was wondering, why is it the result is not trickling in as it was? But then we got to know that the president had put pressure on the Independent Electoral Commission to stop the results. But then there was also some level of international intervention that allowed the chair to announce the results. At the announcement of the results, there was also pressure on him to accept the results. And he did that. But in our own estimation, we felt that the heads of states, the entire international community, knowing the psychology of President Yahya Jammeh, should have praised him for that. But I can assure you he got none. So, few days later, the Independent Electoral Commissioner had gotten the wind that President Jammeh might challenge the outcome of the elections because there was a simple mistake. So, they now reviewed the results and now brought out a new result figures. And that added to the sentiments of President Jammeh, because he got more votes, even though it still did not affect the overall outcome of the election, of which the entire international community, including himself, acknowledged was free and fair. But based on that discrepancy, which was a simple mistake that the Independent Electoral Commissioner chair tried to correct, he focused on that and said the same way he is accepting the result, he is now rejecting the results. And knowing the psychology of the president, the entire international community was thrown into confusion.
So legally, is he, given the scenario that you just painted, legally can he challenge that result?
Yes, he can, because that's what civilized countries do. But there is a very big lacuna. One is that there is no Supreme Court, which is what the Constitution recognizes to handle the petition. So the scenario is that if Yahya Jammeh is going to challenge the result of the election, then he will appoint the Supreme Court judges to sit on his own case. Now, however, the Constitution also says that the Bar Association should have a representative in that Supreme Court, which, for some reasons best known to President Jammeh, he has refused to appoint for a very long time. So there has not been a Supreme Court in the Gambia. And the Bar Association said, based on his rejection of the results, they are on strike. They will not even nominate anybody. So there is a huge turbulence, as it were, legal turbulence, as it were, in the Gambia, to the extent that there is no Supreme Court, and the only way out is that Yahya Jammeh appoints members of the Supreme Court to sit on his own case.
Now, even though we've been hearing, some form of international intervention He's been the president for 22 years. Why hasn't the international community spoken out prior to now?
You know, the ECOWAS has done its own path to a very large extent because there is the principle of non-indifference, there is also the principle of non-interference. And all these have to play. In 2014, there was a presentation of a supplementary protocol advice to the authority of heads of state and government that in West Africa, that every country should include a clause on term of office of the president. Again, don't forget that decisions are taken in ECOWAS not on democratic consideration, but on consensus. In other words, 15 must say yes before the resolution passes. The Gambia and Togo kicked against that. And therefore, there is no term limit in the Gambia. And Yahya Jammeh has been contesting the election and winning because the opposition was fragmented. So to that extent, you cannot say that legally he is wrong. However, in this instance, and also coupled with a lot of impunity going on in the Gambia, ECOWAS didn't want a situation where we will start another round of conflict that will lead to peacekeeping effort that we cannot even comfortably afford at the moment. So, and that's why I think they have taken the bull by the horn, and I think they've engaged in the right preventive diplomacy by going to the Gambia to engage the president. From the level of UNOWAS to the level of the Anglophone presidents, they have been engaging.
How much of an impact will that visit, or do you think that visit will make on the Gambian situation?
I think the good thing about ECOWAS is that the protocols are very clear in terms of the steps. We engage in preventive diplomacy, we engage in sanctions, and then intervention. Because what ECOWAS cannot sit down and allow, and ECOWAS have done that in several countries, is to allow the citizens of the Gambia that paid dearly for a peaceful election to suffer, and also for us to now begin to have issues relating to refugees across the region. So I am very positive, the ECOWAS Heads of State Summit, that something will happen. The peers are engaging him, and I'm very, very confident President Jammeh will again accept the results. I'm very positive about that.
And what is this thing about African leaders not wanting to leave power? Why do you think it happens?
The peg of leadership in Africa is too high. The stakes are extremely too high. And I think that for a very long time, we have also allowed the instrument of power to be the source of economic power. So to that extent, you would understand that there is also inbuilt gains apart from the so-called service that is associated with office. And by the way, power is sweet. Let's be very honest about that. So the only way to come out of that is to begin to continuously push the envelope of 10 limits in the ECOWAS Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance.
It is obvious that the Gambians are hungry for change. Is there any hope for political change in the Gambia?
I think the change is in the air and the people are looking forward enthusiastically to it. For the very first time, I saw the unism amongst the Gambians in terms of how they want to have a new political order. You know, and I think they will just get what they deserve at the end of the day. So I think there is a new political order, a new political calculation, including up to the extent that the person that is coming into power is not even a politician.
Now, your organization has been involved in elections across the West African sub-region. What could happen with the situation we have in the Gambia at the moment? What could happen, and what do you think should happen going forward?
Constitutionally, the Gambia cannot be without a president. By the 12th midnight of 18th of January, Yahya Jammeh's tenure is over. And the international community has acknowledged that much. He will cease to be head of state and commander-in-chief. So 2 scenarios. 1 is that the military takes over. 2 is that the president-elect is sworn into office. The first is not an option for ECOWAS. It's zero tolerance, especially when you have a president-elect. Constitutionally, Yahya Jammeh has a right to reject that election. But the only person that can say the election is credible is the Independent Electoral Commission. And the person has spoken.
Still ahead on Diplomatic Channel. Miles and miles away, Syrians are calling on the international community to intervene quickly to prevent more deaths. Just stay with us.